Hi, I'm Beth Brown, President of the Tennessee Education Association, here with Jim Wright, Chief Lobbyist and Communications Manager for TEA. Over the last several weeks since we have had our COVID-19 outbreak, members have had a lot of concerns, a lot of questions about professional requirements and next steps for schools, particularly now that we know schools are going to remain shuttered for the rest of the year. TEA has been diligently working on responses to the outbreak since the beginning of March, since actually before the legislative session ended, and certainly since we've all kind of gone into our safer at home routines. That advocacy, TEA's advocacy has been really important and critical in accomplishing changes in state law and state rules affecting members. So one of the things I think is really important for us to talk about is the difference between state law and state rule. I know that that's a question that I hear all the time from members. And so, Jim, can you kind of explain to our audience what's the difference between a law and a rule?
Yeah, it's a good question because they both govern almost everything that happens in Tennessee classrooms. So laws, if you think about them, are supreme. I've got a copy of, this is Title 49. This is in Title 49 in the Code of Tennessee. This is all of the laws that govern Tennessee education. You can see there's a lot of them. And even when you have a lot of detail in laws, there are oftentimes gaps within them. Certain laws will not have that sort of granular detail that you need. And so what the General Assembly does after it passes a law, it often will provide the power to a governing board to pass rules. And rules then get down into sort of the everyday aspects of a profession or of an industry or how things are governed. And that rulemaking process is also really important, sometimes just as important as passing of laws. And so at the end of the legislative session, when we realized that schools were going to close, we started working with lawmakers to pass laws that address certain aspects of Title 49 code. One of them is the requirement to mandatory standardized testing each year. That is hardwired in the law. We realized at that point, first off, there's a good chance we will not be able to have testing. Second, that with any kind of break in instruction, the test would be invalid. And third, and most importantly, at least on our end too, we did not want to have that testing sort of soared above everybody's head as an impetus to maybe come back to school sooner than would indicate for the health, safety, and welfare of educators and teachers. So the bill that we worked on before the legislature adjourned, first and foremost, it just suspended testing. There would be no testing. And that needed to be a bill that amended the law saying in this year, no testing. And after that, we realized, of course, that there are a whole bunch of other laws that are based on that standardized testing. And we know them, and we've had issues with them forever, how we use value added, the high stakes nature of what we do with the testing data. All of those things also needed to be addressed, especially in the evaluation system. So we added other things in that bill to suspend the evaluation system, to suspend things like portfolios and so on, because again, we didn't want any impetuses to maybe make decisions to come back to school that were not based solely on the health, safety, and welfare of students and teachers. So pulling all of those things and in essence, nullifying them for this year was part of that bill. Now, that's only one aspect of what governs classrooms. And so within that bill, the legislature granted the state board, which is the governing body that passes rules for education, to make emergency rules to deal with a whole variety of other issues that were going to pop up, because of our suspension of testing and actually the suspension of school for the rest of the school year. So they specifically tasked them to write emergency rules and gave some broad areas about what was needed. And I was really appreciative. We've got a great legal team here. We've got great leadership on the governance side, and with GR and comms, we were able to work with the state board to get emergency rules passed. And Beth, you were a significant part of that. You want to sort of give a brief synopsis on those rules?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, we've got some great teams working for TEA, and we got together cross departmentally and looked at all of the aspects that needed to be addressed with the emergency rules, and crafted a fairly lengthy and quite specific policy recommendation document that we sent to the State Board of Education at their request. And they were able to take that. We saw much of it incorporated into the emergency rules that they ultimately drafted. And one of the things that I was most proud of is that, our team then took, in just a short time frame, because the state board was moving rather quickly to get those emergency rules drafted and then presented to the state board body on April 9th. We were actually able to meet virtually with the State Board of Education's executive director, Dr. Sarah Morrison, and her team, and talk through where we saw some gaps in those emergency rules. We acknowledged first and foremost that they had done a really good job of addressing many of the issues about which we were most concerned and about which our members are most concerned. But there were some gaps. We were concerned that we didn't see any specific guidance on issues like tenure or that sort of thing. And, actually, I got an email this morning from a local affiliate president asking, what about tenure? Because I've been in conversation with our director of schools, and he says that his hands are tied because the state board rules and the state law are so clear on what it takes to earn tenure. And if there's no level of effectiveness or LOE score generated this year, then we can't offer tenure to educators who might otherwise be eligible. And so I was really, really happy to be able to share with them that I'd actually asked that very question to Dr. Morrison of the State Board. And she explained that the State Board and the Department of Education are working on a list of waivers. The department will be recommending a list of waivers to the State Board for approval to address things like tenure that weren't initially included in the state board's rules, because there's kind of some gray area in things that are first and foremost decided by the state board, or things that have to come out of the department. And so I know that the state board and the department are working together on a list of waivers. I know that TEA's attorney has been looped into those conversations as well, which is quite helpful for us to be able to elevate our members' voices in that conversation. But I was able to share with this local leader, hey, they're working on a list of waivers. And I was really excited to see, because she had copied her director of schools on her email to me. He responded immediately within minutes of my sharing that information. He responded that was great news, and that as soon as waivers were available, that his district would certainly be availing themselves of that. So that's exciting, and it also just demonstrates that this is ongoing. And I know that before I ended my last call with Dr. Morrison, I asked her specifically, so you're telling me that there are going to have to be more emergency rules meetings? And she said, oh yeah, they're not finished. As we start really digging into the daily of what has to be addressed, they find new things, and we'll just have to keep meeting to address those needs.
That's right. It's good that we've been able to work with the department and the state board on these issues. We bring a perspective of the educator, the classroom educator, the support professional, what it looks like from being on those front lines. And it's been really helpful that they understand that this is an ongoing process, things will be popping up, and that right now we are honed in on what that waiver process is going to be. I think that, in discussing with them, I can envision sort of a list of check boxes that school systems can know that they can rely on. This is an unprecedented time, but as we all know, suspension of testing is not unprecedented in our state of Tennessee. I mean, we've been through it twice now. And if you think about it, when we were having to work so quickly on a hold harmless bill when the 2016 testing bombed, and one of the things we were concerned about was getting a waiver for tenure because state law proscribes how a teacher can be offered tenure. And we are always insistent that it is offered because it's an important part of being a professional, having that due process. It's an acknowledgement too that this is a true professional and they should be granted certain due process rights. And it has real weight. But back in 16, again, no testing data, no level of effectiveness, and we had to scramble to make sure there were waivers. And one of the things that was granted to any school system was that they can, that the teacher can rely on the previous 2 years of evaluations to be granted tenure in that 5th year. And we're fully anticipating a redo of that. And a lot of other things that we had to work hard on for hold harmless, because again, we had to fight for hold harmless in 2016 and 2018. So the idea that, that we're awfully familiar with this is true. And I really appreciated that, again, a lot of our friends in the General Assembly understood that and had been through this before, and we were able to craft a solid bill. And now we've gone through the first phase of rulemaking, and now we're looking for waivers for certain parts of policy and other rules. And every time something else comes back up, so one of the greatest things about working at TEA is the tens of thousands of members across the state. And teaching is a profession, but it's also an art, and there are unique situations in every place. Teaching in rural East Tennessee is different than teaching in Nashville. And there are things that may pop up, and we get the information and are able to work with the department and the board to make sure those things are addressed. It's going to be quite a process, but it's a daily thing that we are making sure that all of the rights and privileges of educators will be upheld in this amazing, difficult time during the outbreak. But I've been, as with everybody, really pleased with how people have pulled together and us working hard as an association to move forward. And there's going to be a lot more things coming up that we'll have to address as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about being a member of TEA, because TEA is in every district across the state. Members have a direct line to, through our relationships at the state level, to the State Board of Education and the Department of Education. I can pick up the phone and call the commissioner and say, hey, what about this? And express those needs and those concerns immediately. So that's, it's just one of the perks and great things about being a TA member. We've talked about the fact that there are certain things that the state board rules didn't cover, like tenure. I know differentiated pay, again, is something else that while it's not a concept that we support, it is a reality. It does depend on an educator's LOE. And in districts like mine, where we don't get those raises passed down from the state, it's kind of a big deal to be able to draw in some extra compensation. So that was another issue that we raised that we didn't see in the initial rules that were adopted on April 9th. But there were some really good things that were adopted. They did confirm that there was being a suspension of evaluations, including the professionalism rubric, so educators don't have to do that. That was explicit in the rules. They talked extensively about license renewal because we're coming up on that deadline at the end of August. So there was guidance on that. Anybody whose license is set to expire on August 31st has been granted an additional year to get that done. Again, recognizing that with the suspension of evaluations, you're not getting those PDPs that are automatically awarded with a level 3, level 4, level 5 summative evaluation score. For students, I know that this was an issue that several local leaders had raised in my weekly conversations with local affiliate presidents and our board of directors. The worry about students' grades and students not being held to harm or held accountable when they can't necessarily access online learning. And so the state board did clarify that that students' grades would be no lower than they were on March 20th, but students can still, between March 20th and the end of the school year, complete work to raise their scores, but they would not be penalized if they were not able to complete online work, et cetera, during our school closure time. And then another big issue, I know, especially this week with the confirmation that schools will remain closed the rest of the year, there's a lot of grief among our class of 2020. Not just our high school seniors, but also our aspiring educators, our soon-to-be college graduates. And for those aspiring educators, for many of them, they had not been able to finish their praxis exams to get their licensure all tied up and finished. And so it was our recommendation, and we were glad to see that there was an extension for taking those required licensure exams and a waiver on completing student teaching and the required placement hours, because that is certainly something that could not happen during school closures. And the state board granted our educator preparation programs the ability to go ahead and recommend for licensure anybody who was on track, even if they had not been able to pass their praxis test yet. So that was great news, and I know it was certainly a relief to a number of soon-to-be professional educators in our state. So that was just one of many of the great emergency rules that the state board did get passed.
Well, student teachers are near and dear to my heart. They're the future of our profession. And I'm proud to say that STEA is one of the largest student teacher associations in the country. And as student teachers enter the profession, it's important that they know that they join their professional association, because as we move forward, there's going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of concern. There's going to be a lot of decisions that need to be made. And being a member of your professional association is a key part of being a professional and to be able to be treated as a professional. So I encourage every educator, wherever you are, to join TEA.
You know, another concern that I hear repeatedly, even after the General Assembly passed the legislation at the end of the session, after the state board's emergency rule meeting, I still get questions about every other day about, well, are we going to get paid for the rest of the year? Am I going to be laid off? And so it's been really important for us to be able to share our role in making sure that those funds were guaranteed at least through the end of this school year.
One key aspect of the state law, the Hold Harmless bill that was passed before the General Assembly adjourned, was the suspension of the 180-day instructional requirement. Mm-hmm. Part of that suspension, because that's state law, we have to have at least 180 days of instruction. Part of that, what was added to the bill, was that dollars continue to flow from the state to every school system as if they were following the 180-day calendar. The way state funding works is often, as you know, average daily membership, it's bodies and seats. Mm-hmm. And when we don't have any bodies in seats, we had to ensure that there was a mechanism for those dollars to flow. Because the next thing that we have to, and we are looking at it every day with an eagle eye, is the issue of funding. Revenue is going to drop with unemployment going up, people not going out, people not spending money. We are a sales tax state, and we are looking every day at revenue, at where pots of money are, at what the options are to make sure everybody has a job when schools open, you know, in the 2021 school year. It's critical that we as an association look at that as the next steps forward.
So as we wrap up our time together today, I just want to reassure you that TEA remains on the job. We continue to communicate with the State Board of Education, with the Department of Education. I know that just yesterday I submitted to the commissioner a list of recommendations going forward as we contemplate closing out this school year under COVID-19 closures, and also looking ahead at how to start next year. So TA continues to advocate for you. We are offering specific policy recommendations regarding the use of emergency federal funds so that we can make sure that our schools and our students and our educators are taken care of as we continue in this uncertain future. I would just say, as we all continue to work together to get through this pandemic, it's really important for you to know that your association is working for you. If you are not a member, I encourage you to join today because we are the only people, the only professional organization that is putting your voice in those important conversations. Jim, I just want to say thank you for joining me today. Thank you for what your team is doing, as well as our other talented staff at TEA as we continue to work for our educators as they continue what they're doing every single day to provide services to our students, because we know that even when our buildings are closed, education's still happening. So thank you all so very much for what you do every single day. I appreciate you. Stay safe, stay positive.
Thanks, Beth. It's an honor to work for the membership. You all stay safe too.